system to provide information to victims and witnesses, and then that's going to be set out in detail what's going to be in guidance and secondary legislation, what that information is to look like. But it's really around keeping people informed as to progress, and it's an often heard criticism of families and victims that, they're not properly kept informed of things like changes to courts, changes of dates, or have the system explained to them. And the other thing as well is it's going to put in place standards in criminal proceedings, standards of service, again, victims and witnesses can expect to receive. The other big aspect, it's quite a wide-ranging bill. The other big chunk of it is around setting up a national confidential forum for adult survivors of childhood institutional abuse. I think the first time ever, it's split between two lead committees, and that Health and Sport are leading the evidence on the National Confidential Forum, and Justice are leading on the victims and witnesses stuff. Now, this whole bill marks a sea change in our approach to criminal justice in this country, and you've scarcely heard it mentioned in the media, because it actually puts at the heart of the system, and now detractors would argue that it swings too far away from the rights of the accused to a fair trial in favour of the rights of victims and witnesses, and others would argue that it basically calibrates a slightly more equal relationship, one that's long overdue. But even that debate in itself is quite an interesting one to have. And again, not mentioned anywhere in terms of it garnering headlines, and that the Scottish Government is making some fairly fundamental reforms into how criminal justice is calibrated, if you like, in Scotland. The other thing as well is that Kenny McCaskill is on an express train of reform at the moment in across the entire justice system. You've got court reforms going on with sheriff court closures, and a lot of the stuff that currently can only be dealt with at the Court of Session being moved down into Shrieval courts, and just a whole kind of rebalancing going on there. You've got the Lord Gill reforms coming through shortly in terms of civil proceedings. Carlaway still rumbling away and is going to come forward in legislation in terms of amending the law and evidence. There's the community justice system is being reformed. At the moment, what you have is separate community justice authorities, more or less, set up at local authority levels, and there are proposals there to kind of reshape it because it's felt that it's not working. So you've got all this reform going on that is basically going to, in 5 years' time, our justice system will be fairly unrecognisable compared to what it looks like now in lots of ways. Where's the debate on it? Where is the commentary on it? Absolutely none. And this idea that the Scottish Government isn't doing anything, there are some huge meaty bills, there are some big inquiries going on at Holyrood right now, and it's almost like with the noise generated by the flotsam and jetsam, frankly, of the independence debate means that there's no room for any of that. And actually, I think these are things that people would want to know about, that the Scottish Government is actually getting on and doing some pretty big business, if you like, on their behalf. And there ended the lesson on the victims and witnesses bill, and I never knew I knew so much about that, actually.
There we are. No, thank you.
Recall when you have to.
No, thanks for that. And I think it's a very fair point, and I think there's an extent to which one can attribute it to the sort of clouding out of all of other issues by this independence referendum. But of course, the coverage for past measures before this independence bill was in the offing in terms of justice reforms were never that great. I'm not sure if it's actually something that the Scottish press do very well. I mean, I've had innumerable instances where stuff has come up and they just have seemed totally absent from the conversation, absent from the coverage about the sort of stuff that Holyrood gets up to, because it's all covered in this sort of cloud of technicality and confusion, when actually, like this victims and witnesses bill, it touches in a very basic way on how justice works in this country, just like legal aid touches fundamentally on who can get access to justice. And I think that's a really fundamental question, and a really frustrating thing to me, that in Scotland we just don't seem to talk about it very much. Michael, we've been going on for a wee while now. You have one last wee story that you wanted to touch on, didn't you?
Yeah, well...
Oh, sorry, it wasn't you, it was Kate.
Yeah, I know, but it's green room chat. We can put that online. There was a little story with Disney that Kate spoke to us about before. I've got a particular bone to pick with Mr. Disney, the now defunct or semi-defunct or semi-frozen Mr. Disney. But I think I'll let Kate go for it first.
Our First Minister got a few brickbats for how he went out to America for the premiere of Brave, and how much money went into marketing Brave as the Disney film about the Princess Merida that was set in Scotland. And actually I think that was really unfair. I think that's a legitimate part of his role. That's exactly what he's there to do, is to kind of take Scotland onto the world stage. And there is no doubt that the likes of a movie like Brave can encourage people to come and visit Scotland, and it tells a really good story about itself. And actually also what a lot of people liked about it was that here you had a princess who didn't want to be pretty and dress up makeup. She actually wanted to be a woman of substance, if you like, and not just be married off to the highest bidder, but actually be queen in her own right because of her own talents and skills. And here from feminists everywhere. Disney, however, have decided that in order to put the merchandise out in the stores, they've given Merida a makeover, and they've pinched her waist, and they've given her big doe eyes, and they've given her a bust, and they've made her all pretty, and into what is more seen as princess material, and that has attracted criticism, actually, because they have totally kind of missed the point, or if you like, kind of forgotten the point of Merida in the first place. And you know, this is their idea of what constitutes what girls would want to buy, and what should be a role model for girls. And actually there is a big school of thought around those who try to teach healthy relationships. There's a guy called Jackson Katz, who's one of the founders of something called Mentors in Violence Prevention Programme, which is being rolled out in Scotland by the Violence Reduction Unit, about encouraging particularly men to come forward and challenge other men about their behaviour towards women. And he and others involved in this kind of work regularly point the finger at Disney in terms of how they genderise and sexualise the portrayals of men and women to young girls and boys, about how men are all big and muscly and girls are all you know, concerned with their looks more than their actions. And for me, sorry, a long way of getting to the point, I think the First Minister needs to come out and say something. He was big enough, and I agreed entirely, to go out there and laud Disney and get on board with the kind of marketing machine for Brave, and he now needs to call them to account, because what they have done is not a healthy way forward in terms of how our role models for women and for little girls should be. And I think he should stand up and have something to say on it. He found time this week to kind of call out Nigel Farage for coming to Scotland, and I think he should call out Disney and criticise them for mucking around with Merida and actually doing a disservice to little girls who need positive role models to follow. And I think it would give him something quite interesting and different to say as a First Minister and a statesman.
There we are. That's one indictment of Brave there. Michael, what's your bone to pick with the Disney Corporation?
Well, first, I totally endorse what Kate's saying as well, but there's been a long history of things with Disney. There's a beautiful documentary about it, which I will put in the podcast links, about how regressive Disney is in terms of feminism. If you take something like Beauty and the Beast, this is going back a bit, but I mean, if you think about it, in substance, it's a disgusting story. Like, basically, he beats her up, he locks her in a tower, and then she uses her feminine wiles to sort of tame his brutish masculine nature, and then we're all fine. No, wait a minute, you've just endorsed wife beating. Excuse me. It's disgusting. It's a long history of this kind of stuff with Disney.
And only she can change him.
Yeah, these stories are not good at all. Disney, no fan. But there's another history with Disney, just where we're on very controversial territory here, and I know that the Disney company is quite litigious. Let's just.
Oh, joy!
There's one of the most popular stories on my website actually is something that a reader sent me, which was simply how to get arrested in Disneyland, which I advise you to check out. But the fact of the matter is that there have been long years of allegations of Walt Disney, the man himself, and his connections with fascist movements. Now, there's no evidence, I'm saying this loud and clear, there's no direct evidence that he was involved. There are witness statements that he went to open fascist meetings, like meetings held in Hollywood by fascist sympathizers at the time in the kind of Nazi ascendancy time. And I suppose that's just worth bearing in mind when we consider the output of the Disney Corporation. That's all I've got to say about that.
There we are. That was very carefully put, and I would just like to echo before we finish. I entirely agree with what you're saying there, Michael and Kate, about the regressive potential of these kind of narratives. Because you remember, it's kind of first. I remember, I was of the generation when Disney was in the ascendant, and you had your rebaked Hamlets and so on, and certainly if your first sort of encounter with drama, the idea that drama doesn't matter is something which I know many writers would find upsetting, but I think is one that we really have to reject. These stories and the images and characters that we tell ourselves that our children kind of consume when we lay them aside to, get the dinner going or whatever, that kind of thing actually can have a massive influence on how people think. And it's just really irresponsible to sort of say, it's just a cartoon, my dear, let's not take it too seriously. So there we are. That's our gauntlet down to Alex Salmond. Let's see if he says anything.
Oh, we'll see if Walt Disney says anything.
Oh, Walt Disney, well, from beyond the grave.
Well, they'll have to unfreeze him first.
Oh, there we are. Hell freezing over. It'd be a nice opportunity for him to escape. On which note, I think we've got a full sweep from Farage to fascism in a single podcast. I just thought that was possible. Okay, well, Kate, thanks very much again for coming on the podcast.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
Always interesting to hear from you, and we'll be back next week for more chat about undoubtedly the independence referendum, and hopefully not neglecting, as Kate was saying, the other important doings and mischief of this government and the Westminster government in Scotland. And so yes, back with you then. See you next week, Michael.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Shower with sugar lumps, I'll ride you over fences, polish your hooves every single day, and bring you to the horse dentist. My lovely horse, no more running around with the man on your back. Like a train in the night, yeah, like a train in the night.
Then that will make Michael's life significantly easier.